Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Bill Benjamin. Hi, Bill.
Hi there. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. We're going to have a great conversation about the intersection between culture and processes and procedures and systems, and one of my favorite topics. So, Bill, before we jump on, I'm going to introduce you and read your bio. So, you are a partner at the Institute of Health and Human Potential,
Yes.
IHHP.
IHHP. You don't have to, it's a mouthful. IHHP.
Yeah, IHHP. Okay, good. That's totally fine. And you have a degree in mathematics and computer science and 30 years of business experience.
Correct.
And you basically explain how you can build a high performance last 8% culture, which we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And your clients include NASA, Marriott, Intel, the Mayo Clinic, the US Marines, and even surgeons. So you contribute to the New York Times best-selling book, Performing Under Pressure, IHHP's research on the last 8%, and high-performing teams has been published in the Harvard Business Review.
Correct.
Beautiful. That's quite the bio there. So you definitely know what you're talking about.
I hope so.
Yes.
My mom thinks so.
That's good. That's right there. That's enough. Hi, Mom. Yes. All right. So, Bill, what's the last 8% culture?
So let me separate the two, the last 8%, and then I'll talk about culture.
Okay.
So the concept of the last 8% comes from about 7 or 8 years ago. We were working with two executives at a large company, and they weren't getting along. Now, that can happen in small companies too. And so we were coaching them, and they were coached to have a conversation with each other about the impact they were having on each other. So they go and they have the conversation. They come back from the conversation and their coaches individually ask them how it went. And they both say, oh, it went fine. Then the coaches pushed a little bit because they know and said, yeah, but did you really say everything that we said you would say to the other person? And they both said essentially, I got 85, 90, 95% of the way into the conversation. The other person started reacting and I held back. I didn't really step in and say that last 5 or 10%, the part that really needed to be said. And this is a very common experience people have. So we took that idea and we did a research study of 34,000 people and determined that on average, it's 7.56%, which we rounded up to 8. 8% that people feel they leave unsaid in a difficult conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we came with the last 8%. Now, as we workshopped it, people said, well, it isn't just last 8% conversations. There's last 8% decisions. There's risks I need to take. There's decisions where someone's not going to be happy or not like me. There's decisions where I don't know what the outcome's going to be. So it's not just conversations. It's also about decisions and risk taking, which are critical to having a high performance team and culture.
Right, right. So when you're creating a culture that is last 8%, that means people are willing to talk, willing to share, willing to have those hard conversations.
Absolutely. In a second research study that we did of 72,000 people, we also combined this with some work from Sarah Sewell at Stanford. We identified two key pillars of a high performance culture of what we call last 8% culture. The first one is connection. People feel valued. They have a voice. They feel cared about. They're engaged. And that's critical. And when most people do culture and values type work, that's what they focus on. But they often miss the second key pillar, which is high courage. Are people willing to step into the tough conversations? Will they make a tough decision? Will they say no to something? Will they name an inconvenient truth? Will they give feedback and hold people accountable? And in order to have a high performing culture, you need both. You need that high connection and you need that high courage, which are characterized by high care and high accountability. And you
Mm-hmm.
can have both together.
Right. So how do you create it? How do you create the combination of both?
First of all, you have to know where you are. You have to assess. So we created a culture map, which is in the Harvard Business Review article. It's the title of it is The Secret to High Performing Teams. And we took those two key pillars, connection and courage, and we created a four by four quadrant, a culture map. So if you think of where left axis is courage and bottom axis is connection, if you think of the upper left, that's high courage and low connection, that's a transactional culture where results matter
Mm.
over relationships. There's toxic behaviors are allowed. It's a kind of what we call a make a mess environment. There's blame. It's a high burnout, high anxiety environment. It can get results over the short term, but it's not sustainable over the long term. So that's
Right.
your upper left. Now in the bottom right, which many of our clients are in, it's high connection, but it's low courage. We call that a family culture. It's a nice culture, but people are unwilling to do hard things. They don't want to upset someone. They tend to avoid the tough conversations. Um, Decision making gets slowed down. So it takes a long time to make a decision because everyone's got to be happy and you have to include everyone. Um, and there's lots of positive things to a family culture, but it's not enough to have the high care and the niceness. You need the courage. You need the people having tough conversations. Um, I'll skip the bottom left because we don't see too much of that. The goal, the aspiration, is to be in the upper right-hand quadrant, which is high courage and high connection. And that's a feedback-rich culture. That's a highly innovative culture. That's a culture where, the tough decisions are getting made and there are team norms. So when we do our last 8% culture system work, we actually get teams to identify, what does it look like for us to be in the upper right-hand quadrant? I mean, where are we now? So we do this because I'm now answering your question of, how do you get there? You have to assess where you are. We're more in the family or we're more in the, transactional. And then what are the behaviors that will get you into the upper right-hand quadrant?
Yeah.
That's where we
So
start.
paint me the picture of our listeners of that upper hand quadrant. What does that look like?
I mean, it's honestly where a team have set norms for themselves and actually had discussions, which we do as part of our culture system, that say, okay, when there is a last 8% moment, because here's the other thing to understand is that culture is defined in the last 8% moments. So a team has to have a set of agreed to norms for how they show up when there's disagreement, that it's appropriate to challenge each other. Because that way, Addie, when you're challenging me on something, instead of me thinking, where's she coming from? Why is she doing this? It's like, no, I know, Addie. We've talked about this. We're going to agree to challenge each other. We're much more open to it. So a team in the upper right-hand quadrant has agreed to and has a set of norms that say we're not going to avoid, we're not going to be family in the bottom right and just be nice to each other, but we're not going to be transactional where it's just, coming across harshly. We're going to do it with, it's going to be high care and high accountability.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So, how do you know when you walk into a company or an organization that has that culture? What do you feel? What are the feelings there? What do you perceive?
Well, I mean, we actually we love data at IHHP. We love research and data. So sure, we do. So as part of our assessment, we do qualitative interviews. So we do interview people at all levels of an organization, right? So the CEO and the senior team think it's one culture, but the individual contributors or the frontline supervisors think it's different. But we also have a survey. We actually collect data, so we can actually see, even though the CEO is telling us it's a feedback-rich culture, the rest of the organization doesn't think so. So we actually like to combine the qualitative with the quantitative, and then we actually present a report back because the work the culture work. While culture actually exists on teams, it doesn't exist across organizations. It exists on individual teams. That's why you can have a different culture on a sales team than you have on an engineering or finance team, but it starts at the top. So when we do
That's
our
right.
culture,
Yeah. No, go
when we do
ahead.
our culture system work, we start with the CEO and the senior team.
And how hard it is to change their minds, like how set. I mean, I know it's probably different from business to business,
Yeah.
but how, what is your experience? Is it easy? Is it hard? Is it because they're already willing to work with you? It's easier?
It's the number one determinant of whether they will have a successful culture change is whether the CEO and the president and the senior team are open to feedback, are willing to look at themselves and say, hey, we're not perfect. Nobody is. For each individual to recognize their contribution and the things they could do better, because the senior team has to model. We talk about model and own. They have to model the behaviors. They can't expect, people to give each other feedback at the lower levels if they're not. They can't expect everybody to be, high performing if they're not. So it actually starts at the top. And they have to be modeling, and then they have to own it on their teams. They have to be the ones to bring it to their teams.
That's right. That's right. So just like anything else, I mean, when we do our process work, it's always the mindset starts from the top. If you
Yeah.
have the head of the organization saying, I don't believe in processes, so I don't want to do processes, it's not going to work. It
Yeah.
has to start at the top.
Absolutely. I mean, one of our best clients is Tenneco Automotive. Now they're a little larger than most of your listeners. They're 65,000 employees, but it doesn't matter whether it's 65 or 65,000. Jim Voss, the CEO, is a huge believer in the importance of culture. He's a big believer in emotional intelligence because that's kind of the underpinning of how do you actually get people to be skillful in their last 8% moments. They have to be emotionally intelligent. And he's open. He's willing to look at himself. He's very vulnerable and honest. And he's actually done all the work, the training, our sprints, everything. He's done it all himself. So that absolutely is where it starts, is with a CEO and a senior team that are willing to take feedback and are open to this work.
Yeah. So, Bill, what I'm hearing is that, in your opinion, that culture, it can be systematized, that it's not an haphazard thing that just happens, or people, oh yeah, culture is however we feel or what we do,
Yeah.
but you are very much systematically creating the culture as you would like it to be.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we call the product we have called is called the last 8% culture system because and it's hard. Culture feels very nebulous and very soft to a lot of people. And that's where our expertise comes in and being able to codify it, help them understand what it is, and help them understand how do you then change it? How do you then and across an organization, not just because you have to start with a senior team. But then you have to cascade it down. I mean, imagine an organization with 65,000 employees and 4,000 leaders. You have to cascade it down. And the way we do that is by actually enabling each people leader. So we're not doing the training. HR isn't doing it. It's actually each people leader is owning the culture on their teams. And we're giving them tools and skills and ways to actually bring it to their teams. And that's
That's
very
beautiful.
powerful when you've got each leader doing this work and owning the culture on their teams.
You do, absolutely. How do you define a people leader?
I mean, in that, I mean, everybody is a personal leader.
Yeah.
So anyone on a team can contribute to the success of a team. And, typically in an organization, there's somebody who is responsible for the performance, coaching, and development of individuals. They would be considered to be the manager or the boss. So whoever has that, I mean, they have the hiring, firing. Is really, I mean, at the end of the day, right? They
Right.
make decisions about performance bonuses, they make decisions about salaries, they make pretty important decisions. So there is a power differential there. When we think of a formal leader, is how we think about it. Now, hopefully the leader doesn't show up that way, right? Doesn't come at it from a kind of authoritative power point of view, but they actually do have that authority and power.
Yes, yes, that makes sense. How receptive are the people leaders to actually implement that change? I mean, we talked about the top, the CEO, the founder, but as you trickle it down, do you find a lot of resistance? Do you find it's easy?
I mean, it's like any standard distribution curve. We talk about the war for the middle. So there's the 10% that are your change agents, your aggressive learners. They love this stuff. They're off doing it. They're reading the extra things. They're listening to the
Like the early
podcasts.
adapters, right? Those that they
The
will
early
take it and just do
early
it, and then they
adopters.
will be your poster child. Yeah.
Then there's your tail, your 10%, they're out the door, right? They're actively disengaged. We're not worried about them. That middle 80%. So that's really a big part of the work we do is how do you engage the 80% who are kind of like, okay, well, I'm busy doing my job. How's this going to help me? And that's one of the key things is you help identify how is this going to help them, both the organization meet their strategic goals, but help each individual meet their goals, as opposed to it's like, oh, now I have to go do this. I'm already way too busy. So, a lot of our work, we do it in the flow of work. It's part of their normal job. And we help them understand how it helps them be better, right? How it helps them do their job better. And the other great thing about the last 8% and emotional intelligence, it doesn't only apply at work. We all have last 8% moments and mismanaged emotions at home. So that's the other thing that gets people really motivated is it actually also helps them with their I have two teenage daughters, like I'm practicing emotional intelligence every day, right? So it helps them at home. So that's the other thing that gets people really engaged. So when they see that it can help them personally, that's how we get them. That's how we get that middle 80%.
Absolutely. So how did you end up from being a mathematician, studying mathematics and computer science into this line of work?
Yeah, it's not your typical path. So I do have degrees in mathematics and computer science, and I spent 14 years at a computer software company, and I was a high performer. And so they did what organizations typically do. They promoted me, but didn't give me any training. And it turned out I wasn't a very good leader. People didn't really like working for me. I didn't create a great culture on my team. I didn't handle last 8% moments well. And this is going back like 25 years. And I was really struggling. I was struggling personally. I was struggling in business. And that's actually when I got exposed to this work. So, because we've been doing this for about 27 years, and it just really helped me. It made a huge difference for me at work. It made a big difference for me at home. And so 3 years later, I left the computer software industry and, became a partner in this company. And that's what I've been doing for the last 24 years. So I was really fortunate to get exposed to this work, many years ago.
Quite a story.
Hmm.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So if our listeners would like to learn more about you and how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, a couple different ways. One is I'm on LinkedIn, Bill Benjamin, Institute for Health and Human Potential. Our website is IHHP.com. I know that's a mouthful. It's Institute for Health and Human Potential. And then also the Harvard Business Review article titled The Secret to High Performing Teams. You don't have to have a subscription to Harvard Business Review. They give 5 free articles a month as long as you set up an account. So anybody can go on the Harvard Business Review website and get that article. That was written by my partner, JP Palou. So he's the actual author of that. And finally, I'd say keep an eye open for the book. We're actually finalizing the manuscript for our last 8% book. And so, it's still going to be a ways till it's out, but, keep an eye out for that down the road.
Absolutely, yes. And this is, the whole idea of those podcasts that they're evergreens. So we might have listeners right now that are listening to us 4 years after this episode got released and the book is there. So definitely.
There better be a book by then.
Yeah, so definitely look for it. Absolutely, because we are talking to a high performer here. So absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It was great having this conversation with you. And I appreciate the sharing your knowledge.
Oh, I enjoyed being here, and thank you for letting me talk to your listeners. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.